Hey,
What's up, man?
good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Let me just figure out my camera here.
Okay.
Um,
Thanks, man. Thanks for answering my invitation.
yeah. Hold on one second. What's up, dude?
Okay.
What do you need?
Good.
What do you need?
What day training?
What time is his mom? I'd like to do it, not at the very end, not the last date. I'd like to be driving home on the 29th or something. 27th, 28th.
Okay.
It could be earlier
Okay.
because we're going out on the 22nd or 23rd. So just not the last day, basically. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. How's everything over there?
Yeah, things are good. Just
Cool.
busy hockey this time of year.
Cool.
We do basically hockey guys and golfers.
Yeah,
So,
get that.
big hockey off season right now.
That's cool, man.
Yeah. How about you?
We're still in lockdown, so basically nothing to do.
Right. It's not great.
Not really. Didn't have enough vaccination for everyone.
That'll do it.
Yeah. So, can you introduce yourself for the coaches in Taiwan?
Yeah. So Ben Shear, owner of Athletic Edge in New Jersey. We primarily train hockey players and golfers. Been doing it a long time. 30 years probably, almost, something like that.
That's cool.
Started in 1990, so literally 30 years, 1991. So decent amount of time doing it. So, not that many people make it this long in this industry. So I feel like I accomplished something, at least surviving.
That's good, man. That's good.
Yeah.
So, I saw a lot of posts, a lot of things you post on Instagram, and it's like basically just like what you said. It was like hockey and golf.
Yeah, that's basically what we do. And what's good about it is because, like in my world, obviously we have our own facility, but it's not a giant facility. We have about a 7,500 square foot facility. Everything's by appointment only. And, kind of hockey and golf work great together because they're opposing seasons, right? The people, when you're in season for golf, not that you're not training at all, but obviously your volume is going to be a little bit less. So, we're busy with our hockey guys because that's their off season where they're in training every single day, 5 days a week, whatever the case may be. And then when they go back in season, then we're starting to hit the fall, winter here, where golf is kind of going into its off season and kind of opposite. So it works really nicely where you kind of allow, from a business perspective at least, to stay busy all year long, where you're kind of in and off season for your two primary sports are opposing each other. We still do all sports, but we used to do tons of lacrosse and other sports like that. And the problem is their in season was the same as golf. So in that off season, we couldn't service everybody. We would be too crowded. And then, it was like, and then the in season would come and then there would be nobody around. So we would be oversold out at certain times and really slow at other times. So this is a much better combination.
Cool. But why those two sports? I mean, for all those sports, why these two?
So, I love hockey. My son's a hockey player. I've worked with a bunch of NHL guys. Been doing hockey a long time. But it was always kind of more secondary to the golf. When I started doing sports training in 1991, really wasn't a thing. People didn't really do it. There was only a few people in the whole country even doing it. So, I quickly realized, wow, if I ever want to have a family and support myself, this isn't really a business. And I wasn't going to be able to earn a living, and I wasn't going to be able to make any money. And when I realized that, I started saying, well, who else could I train? I didn't really want to be filling up my days training housewives who were just doing weight loss or whatever it is. That didn't interest me. I wanted people who had a function and a goal and were trying to accomplish something with what they were doing. So I kind of stayed away from, that general fitness model. But what I quickly realized is there's not enough athletes around, right? So your high school kids, well, they're in school all day and you can get them in the afternoon, but it's not a business to have, 3:30 to 8:30 at night be your only time for training, right? And we've seen that in the United States over and over again, where these franchise sports training places open up for kids, and they open these big, beautiful facilities, and in 2 years they're out of business because that's not a business. It's not enough. You can't have a big, expensive facility and work for, 4 hours a day. You're just not going to work, right? So that was a problem. And then I was like, okay, well, I can work with professional athletes. And I had some professional guys, but where I live in New Jersey, there's not hundreds of them, enough to keep me busy. And when they're in season, you don't see them at all because they have to work with the team strength coach or whatever the case may be. So they were out. College guys were great and gals, but they were only home in the summer. So I started thinking, like, who else can I work with that I think would be interesting people to train, but, or kind of can be more all year long, can come at random times in the days. And so I started thinking about golfers, right? Because they're such passionate people. Like people who golf, they just love the game. They love everything about it. And they all are trying to get better. They're taking lessons. They're buying new equipment. They're doing all of this stuff. And, golf fitness wasn't really a thing then, but I knew it was going to be a thing. And I always felt like it was going to be a big deal. And so I was like, look, I think I can help these golfers. They have back pain. They have this pain. They want to hit it farther. They want to do all these different things. So and they tend to have money, right? Golf happens to be an expensive sport. So if you're serious about golf, you tend to have some money. You're joining country clubs. Even if you're just playing in the regular municipal course, it's still going to cost you $100 a round to go out and play. You got to buy clubs, all that kind of stuff. So they really fit my model. And because they were passionate and had the finances and all that stuff, I started working with golfers. And so in the 90s, there really wasn't a lot of stuff out there. So I started digging into, I'm a science guy, so I started digging into the science of, 3D biomechanics and ground reaction forces and all of this cool stuff in golf. And, before what's going on today, there were very few of us asking these questions and going down these rabbit holes. And, so when you started calling up people who were doing research at universities or whatever, they actually were like super excited to hop on the phone and talk to you because it was like no one ever cared about what they were doing before, right? Like I was the first guy. I was like, oh, like I'm really interested in what you're doing. So I got a lot of easy, access to really smart people. And I asked a lot of questions. And all of a sudden I became friends with the kind of who's who in the golf science world. And all of a sudden I was in. They're like, well, why are you asking these questions? Well, what are you going to do with the information? I was like, I'm a trainer. I do performance coaching with people. If I can really understand this stuff, I think I can do a better job in the gym with them or whatever else I need to do. And so they started asking me, well, what are you doing in the gym to change these things? Hey, can we look at some of your people and see, are their mechanics changing or whatever the case may have through what you're doing? And all of a sudden I ended up in this world. I was getting in great information. I was sharing good information, and we all kind of were off and running and back in the day. And that's kind of how I got it. And all of a sudden I was kind of went from a guy just saying, hey, maybe I should work with golfers to kind of the top of the golf pyramid relatively quickly as I go through the situation. Hold on one second. Sorry.
Go.
Okay. So, that got me in that situation. Yeah, sorry about that. My kid's trying to schedule his moving to college date. And he's asking what time, if it's okay. So I apologize. So, all of a sudden I was kind of up in there. And then, I got introduced to my first tour player in 1998 and started working with professional golfers back then. So even back then, I was one of the only guys even training tour players, period. Like it wasn't even a thing on tour, really. There were no fitness trailers on the tour. There was no medical. Most guys did not golf. Obviously, that was still the time of smoking cigars and eating donuts and, lifting weights was going to make you too tight and make you no good and all of that stuff, right? And we knew that wasn't true. I mean, it's like, if working out's good for every other sport, why is golf somehow the only sport in the world that working out's no good? I mean, it made no sense that it was going to be somehow different than any other sport that we were training people for. So, the guys I had some success, and then it kind of just snowballed from there. And here we are a lot longer later and somehow still doing it and still enjoying it. And, what's cool now is technology and advancement in both from a golf perspective, hockey perspective, all of these sports, we have more and more information than we've ever had before. And so we have technology advancing us. And so because I'm a science guy, our ability to train is better. Our ability to apply our sports sciences is better. Our ability to monitor athletes is better. Our ability to do everything is just so much better than it's ever been. And it allows us to keep learning and keeps it interesting as opposed to like, okay, well, now I know how to lift weights and I have all the magic answers and, just lift heavy stuff. Like some people still are proponents of that. Oh, just lift heavy and get stronger. That's going to make you better. And sure, to a point it will, right? If you're weak and I get you stronger, yeah, you're going to get better. But on a high level, that's overly simplistic. So, you know, I think that it's kept me engaged in the process as the sports sciences and the other things have continued to grow and allow us to think differently, experiment, try different things, that kind of stuff.
That's that cool. Quite a journey, man. Really cool.
Yeah, thanks.
So I'm going to ask you the first question. So you work basically with golfer and hockey player. So it's basically like rotational athletes, right?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of similarity. I mean, obviously, there's other components to hockey where, you know, you have more conditioning and obviously, you know, that stuff. But sure, there's a lot of similarities within hockey and golf. I mean, the rotary mechanics of a hockey player are a little bit more linear than they are purely rotary. Like, if you think about, like, forces in a golf swing, right? We know there's a linear component, there's a rotary component, and then there's a vertical component, right? We have all three dimensions. Like, so I kind of move down the target line, I rotate, and then I kind of go up. You know, you hear people talking about jumping now. You watch Justin Thomas off the ground, Bubba Watson, all these type of players, right? You have all that. But to create the rotation, you have to push and pull with your feet. Not that they're moving on the ground, but one is pushing and one is pulling in the backswing, and vice versa on the downswing. Well, if I'm on skates and I push-pull, I do a split. So hockey players use a lot more lateral motion so they can use the edges of their blades to create that friction against the ground to then be able to translate into rotation. So similar but slightly different.
Yeah. So can we dig a little bit deeper into like golf, like the rotational movement and how we train the rotational power?
Yeah. So I think that, like I said, we have all of these components. We have a linear component that kind of move, you know, kind of moving down the target line. We have that rotary component, and then we have that vertical component. You know, I think different players, depending on their swing style, need to focus on different ones. So I don't think everybody, I think almost everybody needs vertical. Let me say that. Not everybody is going to be super rotary.
Yeah.
And some people are definitely going to move more lateral, right? And now in today's current world, you know, somehow lateral has become the plague. You shouldn't be lateral. But yeah, Jimmy Ballard and the swing connection theory and Rocco Media and Hal Sutton and lots of great players for a very long time had a lot of lateral in their golf swing, right? They weren't super stationary and rotary and vertical. They moved and, you know, they taught you move off the ball, move into the ball, right? I mean, and we see that in baseball. We see that in a lot of other sports. You know, that's still a good thing, I think, for certain body types, right? If I'm a person and I'm lacking hip rotation or I'm lacking thoracic mobility, well, trying to be really rotary is going to be pretty tough, right? So, you know, we're always saying, get your shoulder behind the ball, get a bigger turn, do this, do that, whatever the case may be. But the reality of it is, in the end, is that if I don't have the mobility to be really rotary, using some more lateral is going to help me. It's going to allow me to create more speed. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of people who are playing golf are in their 50s and in their 60s. They've been sitting behind a desk working for 40 years. You know, it's great that they come to the gym. It's great that we try to increase their mobility. It's great that we try to do all those things. But if I got a guy who barely can move from sitting behind a desk for 40 years, and he's going to come see me, let's say, twice a week, I'm not going to make him super mobile. Can I improve him a little bit? Sure, I can improve him a little bit. But I'm also not going to spend every minute of my time only on mobility, because I also need to get them stronger. I need, there's a lot of other things I probably want to do with that person as well. So it's like, how much time do I really have to make them mobile? And am I going to unwind 40 years of sitting behind a desk? Or do I get them to understand, hey, look, a little bit more lateral in your swing is another easy way to create some speed. You can do it right now. It doesn't demand as much mobility in the hip and the T-spine, which we know after assessing millions of golfers over the years. Those are the big problem areas for most golfers. So I'm quick to tell my people, look, you got to move off of it a little bit and move into it a little bit. And it's incredible how many people, by me telling them it's okay, because their golf pros telling them it's not okay, all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I played my best round of golf in a long time. And oh, by the way, my back didn't hurt, because they're not trying to crank and turn into something that they don't even have. So, you know, I think when we want to look at how we look at power in these players, I think we got to understand, A, how they move, and then say, for you, we got to make sure we get more lateral. For you, more rotary is more important. Like I said, I think they all need that vertical component at the end, kind of pre-impact. You got to feel that. And I think that's the easiest way to create speed is through that vertical component. But, you know, you can really get some big bang for your buck in the other areas when you understand how the person should be moving and can be moving. And then you can do simple things like even how you change your medicine ball drills to over focus on one side or the other, right? Like if I'm standing facing a medicine ball wall and I'm doing like a rotary medicine ball throw, well, that's creating much more push-pull. If my chest is facing the wall, that's going to be really focusing on rotary ground forces in the ground. But if I turn sideways and I go throw it into the wall, well, now I'm getting a lot more of a lateral component, right? So I could be doing a quote rotary medicine ball throw, but if I need a guy who needs more rotary, I can have him stand what I call parallel to the wall, chest parallel to the wall. And if I got a guy I want to get more lateral speed, I'm going to turn him perpendicular to the wall and have him throw it into the wall that way. So he is working on weight transfer and all of those type of things. So you can take simple concepts that we're all using and understand what the person needs to do in their swing and just make small modifications that can give big changes and big results.
Yeah, that was really cool, man. I mean, I know there's going to be coaches who know or familiar with what you just said, but I don't think there's a lot of coaches in Taiwan like understand what you just said.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't think most people think about it. I think they just think about them as different exercises versus saying which one should I use and why do I apply which one? Like, what am I actually doing at the ground if my chest is facing the wall? What is my, ground reaction forces like? What is happening with my ground reaction forces when I stand perpendicular? Wide stance, narrow stance, with step, without a step, whatever. All of those things can be really purposeful and really important in how you apply it. And if I got a person and I'm trying to get way more lateral and I'm only focusing on the rotary, those people tend to kind of start reverse pivoting and get super spinny because they can't load into their hip, right? Because now they go to do your rotary move, but they don't have any internal hip rotation on that trail side. They try to do this big turn thing, and now they're leaning the other way.
Yeah.
Like, oh, now I got a mess.
Yeah.
Right? So that's no good, right? So you got to understand why you apply what you give to each person.
Yeah. So does that mean like if a client comes to you, you're going to like do a like movement assessment, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. I start everybody with a movement assessment. I want to see how they move in all three planes of motion. I think like TPI and all of them, there's a lot of great assessments that are out there, but I don't really look at that as this three-dimensional as I would like it to be. I really want to see, and again, I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what screen you use. I mean, because they do a great job as well. But I mean, every movement has some component of all three dimensions, whether it's stability in the frontal plane while you're moving in the sagittal plane or whatever the case may be. So I like to do enough screens that I can say, you're a good mover in the sagittal plane. You're not great in the transverse plane. You're good in the frontal plane, whatever. Or you're good in these two. You're not so great in this one. And the sad part is what you learn is the transverse plane, the rotary one, is the one that most average golfers are bad at. Right? A lot of them are decent in the frontal plane.
Yeah.
And most of them are okay in the sagittal plane.
Yeah.
The one we all think about as golf rotation is the one that most people are bad at.
Yeah.
So yes, we got to try to help improve them, but should we be trying to shove that down their throat if the guy's 60 years old, like I said, sitting at a desk for 40 years? I'm not saying we shouldn't work to try to help make it a little bit better, but my 2-day-a-week guy, I'm going to try to improve that, but I'm going to get him to learn to use laterals and get better at golf right away. Because most people are not doing fitness. Most people who are coming to you for golf fitness, some are like golf, like they're like workout nuts. But a lot of them are just want to play better golf, right? Yeah. So if I just say, okay, we got to get you to be able to have more internal hip rotation throughout, well, that's going to take me, 5 times a week for the next 3 years. Well, that guy's not going to be my client very long. He's going to be like, get by. But if I can help him get better at golf tomorrow, then I'm the man.
Yeah.
Right? And I'd rather be the man than lose my clients. So
cool,
you try to help them with the other stuff as well. I'm not saying you ignore it, but you kind of peel the onion slowly on those things while giving them a way to help make some improvement right away.
Cool. So you mentioned a lot about like ground reaction force. So how does ground reaction force works for like rotational athletes?
Well, I mean, ground reaction force is how we create movement, right? I mean, if I was standing on ice, I wouldn't be able to rotate very fast.
Yeah.
Right? So how we interact with the ground is really important. And I think that we can understand, I mean, just the same example I just gave you there with the med ball about 2 different ways to affect ground. Well, I can do the same thing with a cable exercise. If I'm pulling a cable or pressing on a cable, well, is my body line parallel to the cable line? Or is it perpendicular to the cable line? Because both of them, again, are going to affect, do I use more rotary ground reaction force, rotary torques? Or do I create more linear torques? Do I create more vertical torques? What's the direction of the cable? Is the cable moving high to low? Is the cable moving this way? Because I mean, I see a lot of people doing exercises and you just look at the direction of the cable or they're using bands or whatever they're using. And you're like, the force direction is not going in the direction that you think you're doing in your exercise.
Yeah.
Right? The line of force is just totally wrong. Right? So again, that understand that line of force is going to dictate how we then use the ground. And again, I gave a med ball example. Those are examples that you can use with cable columns or however, bands. I mean, you're going to use these concepts in everything that you do. I can then bias planes of motion. You know, I can do a chop and lift, like what is coming over my shoulder down this way, and that's biasing the sagittal plane, right? Well, I can turn sideways and do it this way, and now I'm biasing frontal plane.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, how you think about the directions of force and your orientation to cables, bands, walls, whatever you do, I think is really important to good training.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're concepts that if you step back and think about, you can apply to almost anything.
Cool, man. So the next question would be, it come from one of my friends who coaches like pure golf player in Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so the question I want to ask is, I know you would categorize golfer into like releaser and resistor.
Yeah.
So can you like explain it? Like what is releaser and what is resistor? And
Yeah.
how you categorize this and what would be different for their training program?
Yeah. So basically this is a concept that I came up with 5 or 6 years ago. I was teaching, you know, something that I was doing with my athletes, and I started teaching in Mike Adams' golf biodynamics certification. Maybe that's where he probably saw it. But basically, you know, I think if we look at the biggest hitters in professional golf or over time, right? If we look at Rory McIlroy, Jason Day, you know, those type of players, they have very little hip rotation and they have a big shoulder turn. So they're resisting their hip turn. They tend to have shorter swings and they're using elasticity, right? They're using that stretch shorten cycle. They're using muscle elasticity to create speed. And for years in golf, we heard about X factor stretch and X factor and all of these terms. And that's basically what you did, right? You resisted your lower body. You turned your upper body against it. You created this stretching action, and then the muscles would snap back. The shoulders would come whipping through because of the stretch of the muscles through the torso. And we use this stretch shortening concept, right? So those guys are obviously huge hitters. But I could say, let's go take a look at Phil Mickelson. Let's take a look at Bubba Watson. Let's take a look at John Daly. Well, those guys don't resist their hips at all. They actually let their left heel come up, their knee move, their lead heel come up, their knee comes in. They have these big giant turns. They turn their hips, they turn their shoulders, they turn everything. Well, what are they doing? They're using distance and time to create speed, much less so than elasticity, right? So it's like there's a rate. Like if you're super elastic, you might not need a long runway to create speed. But if you're not super elastic, you need a longer runway to get up to speed. So by releasing everything and getting my club much further behind me, deeper, whatever you want to call it, that gives me a longer runway and more time and distance to create that speed, right? So I think that most amateur golfers, especially ones in their 50s and 60s, all should be releasing because very few 60-year-olds are super elastic.
Yeah.
Right? Like, let's just be honest. They're just not, right? So, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying you shouldn't do some work to maintain what you have or whatever, but you're not going to take a 60-year-old and take them from no elasticity to super elastic. You might get them a bit more, but you're not going to make them. So what can they do? They can get time and distance, and all of a sudden, they can create a lot more speed. They can get behind the ball more. They have more time to create the speed. They're not depending on that elasticity. They're moving the whole system working together more efficiently. They get a lot of bang for their buck out of it. I mean, obviously, the guys in the long drive, they actually do both. They release the front side and still create a lot of elasticity and do it. So it's not like it's an absolute that somebody who releases has no elasticity and vice versa. It's just where you fall on that like elastic continuum. Are you super elastic and over here and you're going to resist everything? Or are you like, you know what, that's not really my strength. But if I get a little bit more time and distance, I think I can equal the same speed, right? We wouldn't say that Jason Day and those guys hit it so much farther than John Daly, but at the same time, they're using totally different techniques, right? Yeah. They're using a totally different strategy to create the speed. So, and I would also say that the released swing puts way less stress on the body, right? That super elastic torquing action puts a beating on you. We tend to see a lot less injuries on people who are released than the people who are torquing. Obviously, Tiger, when he was younger, was a huge torquer. Jason Day, all of these guys. I'm not saying that you should tell them, don't be a resistor, because they might not be playing on tour if they're not a resistor. It is what makes them special. It may ultimately hurt them, but in the big picture, it allows them to be great. And I don't think you should ever take it away from someone who's great. I might take it away from a 55-year-old guy whose back hurts, who's playing at the local, municipal golf course or country club. I might say to him, you know what, you should release because you're not making any money doing this. You're going to hit it farther. You're going to take the pain out of your back, like for you. But I wouldn't tell Jason Day, hey, don't do it. Because if he gets this much worse, he may not be world-class anymore.
Yeah.
Right? This is what might make him who he is. Yeah. So you got to always be careful when you're working with elite population to change them in some dramatic way like this to say, this is better. Well, you better be positive if you're going to tell him it's better. You better be positive it's better. Because, when you're working with professional athletes that are, 99.9% better than everyone else in the world who's ever played, your odds of making them worse are a lot greater than your odds of you making them better. And, I always get people call me up and they're like, or, message on my account, like, oh, it's so easy to help the people you're working with. They're thoroughbreds. They're the best. And I'm like, wow, I own a gym. I work with both kind of people. Like I just said, with those people, you have this much room for improvement and everything to lose.
Yeah.
You get a guy who comes to use a 15 handicap, almost anything that you do that's positive makes him better. Anything. And you almost can't make them worse. Like, oh, they got stronger. Okay, they're better. Oh, you got a little bit more flexible. Okay, you're better. Oh, you can do this. Oh, you're better. Everything makes them better. So when people say that, I laugh. I'm like, you obviously haven't worked with a tour player before, because that's a silly statement to make.
Yeah. So then how do you categorize if it's, do you do any test to categorize? Is it releaser or resistor, or you just watch the movement?
Yeah, so no, we do different tests. The most simple way we do it that everybody can do is we use jumps. We use counter movement jump versus a squat jump. So for people who don't know the difference, a counter movement jump is like your typical jump where if I just said to you jump as high as you can, you would go down before you go up, right? Where a squat jump is you go down to your bottom, you hold that bottom position, right? And you got to hold it for at least 4 seconds. So that stretch reflex gets overridden, and then you go right up without any countering down. There's no down movement. It's just straight up. And we want to look. So what happens when you do the down up move, you're creating a stretch shorten. It's not the same exact ones you use in golf. It is for the vertical force part. So it's partly the same. But in general, as humans, we're either good at using stretch reflex or we're not good at using stretch reflex. I don't think you're good at rotary stretch reflex and bad at jumping stretch reflex. Either you are elastic or you're not elastic. I don't think you're going to be not one, you know what I'm saying, or the other. Either you are or you're not. So we look at counter movement jumping versus squat jumping. And the person who's better, my threshold is 10 to 15%. The person who's better at a counter movement jump than they are at a squat jump, which you would think, based on everything we've ever been taught in school, that everybody's going to be better at the counter movement jump.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise, they are not. And I'm going to tell you that most people over the age of 50 Most people are better squat jumpers than they are counter movement jumpers. They jump higher, they create more force. We put them on force plates. Like, that's just a misnomer. The problem is all of the studying we've done in the history of exercise science is at universities with young kids and healthy populations, or we go study pro teams and pro athletes. And yeah, they're really better at those things. Take the 55-year-old guy sitting behind his desk for 30 years and say, show me your elasticity. Guess what? He's not very good at it, right? So what I'm actually finding is that our older population, they're actually way better at the squat jump than they are at the counter movement jump, because they literally don't have the stability and the controls that when they go down hard and they have to change direction, they don't even have what it takes to actually properly decelerate those forces, create proper dynamic stabilization, and then transfer that energy back up the chain, right? So they don't have those tools. Never mind, they're not super elastic. Their tissue, look, sorry, as you age, your tissue quality is not as good as it was. I'm not saying that doing work can improve it. Of course it can. But there's no way, if I'm doing work A and you're doing work B and I'm 60 and you're 18, sorry, 60-year-old dude, you're not going to be what the 18-year-old guy is. You're just not. Can 60-year-old guy be a good version of himself versus a bad version of himself? Absolutely. And I'm not saying don't do the work. Yes, do the work. But unfortunately, it's why athletes are forced to retire in most sports. They get to a point where their muscle elasticity, the neurosystem, how fast it fires off those muscles, slows down a fraction, whatever it is, their physiology is changing. They didn't like forget how to play their sport. Their physiology is deteriorated to the point where they can't do it on the highest level. And they have the best trainers, they have the best coaches, they have the best everything. And we still, every person on the planet will get to a point where it's like, you can't be that level of elite anymore, right?
Yeah.
So we do change. And the average golfer, at least in the United States, is somewhere between 54 and 56 years old. So that guy who's been sitting behind his desk 30 years, he's not Mr. Elastic. And, I don't know about everybody else's gym, but in my gym, the average, like those type of guys, that part of the population, we tend to see those people 2 times a week. Some people are more committed. We'll see them 3 times a week. But guess what? 2 times a week, and you're still sitting at your desk for 50 hours during the week. I mean, you're only going to do so much with like their elasticity and mobility. You're going to improve it, but you're not going to improve it from I'm not elastic to I'm super elastic. I might just be a bit more elastic, which is still great, but that person releasing, right? The person who's not elastic, the person who does better in their squat jump, they're a releaser because it shows that they don't use stretch shorten really effectively. The person who's really good at their counter movements, that person is going to be a resistor because they're really effective at utilizing that stretch shorten, right? So of all the people I've ever tested, I've only had about 5 to 7 guys who are above 45 years old on force plates, testing on force plates, actually test better on force plates with a counter movement jump than a squat jump. And those guys are workout fanatics, people who have never stopped working out. They're people who have never had a desk job. They're people who have never done any of those things. These are people who have lived a super active lifestyle, like I said, no desk job, and are just gym junkies. So people who kind of maintained it through their life. I've never had a 45-year-old or older person who's been sitting behind a desk for 50 years show up and on a force plate create more force faster in its counter movement jump than they are a squat jump. Not ever. I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible, but I haven't seen it other than for a very few people. So those people are going to really benefit from that released idea because they're not super effective at using elasticity. And the time and distance they gain is a great way to offset lack of elasticity. And if you can get a little bit more elasticity while you're releasing, boom, now you got something great, right? So I'm not saying don't train it. Don't try to get some of it. I'm just saying you're going to get more quick result the other way. And then, hey, if you can throw some icing on the cake, let's go.
Cool. So is there any test besides jumping?
In my gym, I use all kinds of stuff. I have a lot of high-tech equipment. I have 1080 motion machines that measure forces and velocities and powers and all kinds of stuff. And we do actual rotary ballistic movements. I mean, the other thing you can do is, there's a thing now called the ballistic ball. It's basically a medicine ball that has a sensor in it. You could get I think Pushband temporarily has stopped their free motion measurement, but they used to have a free motion measurement where you could wear a push band around your arm, but you can get a ballistic ball, which has a sensor in it. It measures velocity and force and all that kind of stuff. And you can literally do like a think about.
Sorry, man. Sorry, I lost you. Sorry, man. I lost your voice. So, can I restart it again? Can you hear me? Okay, I'm gonna start again.